The kamikaze was a physical attack on an enemy warship by an airplane with no consideration for survival. This unconventional attack had a huge impact on the world. In this video, we will consider various information about the Kamikaze Special Attack Team from various perspectives. In this second video, I will explain about the kamikaze suicide attacks in the Philippines that unfolded after the first suicide attack. The kamikaze attack was designed to assist the Allied fleet in the Battle of Leyte, known as Operation Shake Ego, in which the Allied fleet put all of its forces against the U.S. forces aiming to retake the Philippines. The objective was to disable the enemy carriers in order to gain a slight advantage in the operation. The kamikaze unit led by Seiki conducted its first operation on October 21, but failed to detect the enemy and returned without further action. On October 22, Lieutenant General Fukudome, Commander-in-Chief of the 2nd Air Fleet, arrived in the Philippines with 200 aircraft. Onishi asked Fukudome to participate in Operation Kamikaze, but Fukudome believed that he could fight the Americans with conventional attacks and refused to participate in such a suicidal operation. However, the Battle of Leyte made it clear that his idea did not work at all. Seiki had been unable to find the enemy ship on his fourth sortie and had returned without it, and he was getting impatient. On October 25, Seiki heard from Korea Fleet that an enemy carrier had been spotted, and took off again. At 7:40, the 4 kamikaze aircraft spotted a carrier group commanded by Rear Admiral Sprague. The carrier's radar also showed a large number of friendly aircraft, which were unaware that they were Japanese aircraft. One of the planes swooped down on the escort carrier Santee and blew a hole in the flight deck, but it escaped ignition and was not fatally injured. 2 of the planes were hit by anti-aircraft fire before the collision and were shot down. The remaining one hit the escort carrier Sewanee, causing its fuselage and bombs to explode, resulting in 150 casualties and heavy damage. At 10:49, 5 planes led by Seiki came at the enemy carrier. When the Zero fighter hit the escort carrier St. Lo, the aviation fuel exploded and the carrier was quickly set on fire. The captain gave the order to leave the ship in a few minutes and the carrier sank in half an hour. The escort carriers Kikan Bay and White Plains were also attacked and hit. The results of the Kamikaze Corps battle reached Onishi. It showed that 1 carrier had been sunk, 1 carrier had been severely damaged by fire, and 1 destroyer had been sunk. It is said that Onishi said that he might be able to get by with such a large number of results with only 5 planes hitting each other. With the results of this battle, Onishi decided to continue the suicide attacks that he had thought would be limited to the Philippines. The U.S. carrier fleet suffered 1,500 dead, 1,200 wounded, and 128 aircraft lost in the kamikaze attack. On October 26, upon hearing of the results of the kamikaze suicide mission, Emperor Showa said, "Did you have to go that far? But you did well." Fukudome, the commander-in-chief of the 2nd Air Fleet, had suffered heavy casualties without much success in the Battle of Leyte. When the results of the kamikaze mission were revealed, Fukudome agreed to participate. Thus, the kamikaze attacks were greatly increased. On 30th of October, the Essex-class carrier Franklin and the Independence-class carrier Bellowwood. On 5th of November, the Essex-class carrier Lexington. On 25th of November, the Essex-class carrier Essex and the Independence-class carrier Cabot were heavily or moderately damaged and forced to leave the line. The heavy damage to aircraft carriers caused by the Kamikaze Attack Force the 38th Task Force Commander-in-Chief William Halsey Jr. to cancel a planned carrier-borne air raid on Tokyo on November 11. Halsey said, "We cannot risk our carriers unless we have effective countermeasures against kamikaze attacks." Even the bravest American soldier would not accept a mission that he could never survive. Perhaps it was because of the culture of seppuku, but we could not believe that we would be able to secure enough pilots to carry out this effective attack. The information that the results of the kamikaze attack would be quite impressive would be of great value to the enemy. Therefore, we think it is necessary to conceal this fact. In fact, throughout the Pacific War, censorship of suicide attacks was at its most severe. On January 1, 1945, The Allied Grand Fleet, led by General MacArthur, set out to capture Luzon. The Japanese blocked its advance with kamikaze attacks. The Japanese forces in the Philippines flew sorties in both land and sea, with crews ranging from experienced instructors to inexperienced trainees boarding almost all of the aircraft in operational condition. When MacArthur saw the battle between the suicide planes and the American fleet, he said, "Thank God. They are aiming at our warships, but most of them can withstand a blow. But if they attack our troop transports with such ferocity, we will have no choice but to turn back." He feared that a suicide attack would be so powerful that it would determine the outcome of the Battle of Luzon. Major General Jesse B. Oldendorf, commander of the 77.2 Mission Group, said, "Japanese suicide planes appear to be capable of carrying out attacks without much interference. Any further damage may seriously and adversely affect the current and future important operations. If the suicide planes attack the transports, the consequences could be disastrous." This was an urgent report of the war situation. However, the Japanese Army and Navy had almost exhausted their aircraft in this attack, and could only launch sporadic attacks after this. However, among the American troops who suffered heavy losses in the suicide attacks to the end, there is an assessment that if the Japanese had had 100 more suicide planes in the Philippines, they could have delayed the Allied invasion for several months. The Navy Air Corps launched 333 suicide planes in the Battle of the Philippines, losing 420 crew members, and the Army Air Corps launched 210 planes in suicide attacks, losing 251 crew members. The U.S. forces sank 22 ships and damaged 110 others in suicide attacks, while 12 ships were sunk and 25 damaged by conventional air attacks. Only 14% of the total number of aircraft lost in combat by the Japanese in the Philippines were lost in suicide attacks. The effectiveness of suicide attacks as a tactic became clear, as they inflicted relatively little damage to conventional air attacks, but produced significant results. However, the Allied forces continued to march on Leyte, Mindanao, and Luzon while suffering damage from suicide attacks. It also became clear that suicide attacks were only one of the delay tactics. With the advance of the Allies, the Philippines became theirs. Onishi retreats to Taiwan to lead more kamikaze suicide missions. The Allied forces were closing in on Japan. The kamikaze attacks became even more fierce. In the next article, I will explain about the kamikaze in the Battle of Okinawa. If you enjoy this article, please subscribe to our channel and click the like button.